This is my first step to be a rugby politician, mate.
This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and today, no Ewan McKenzie. Ewan is busy down on the farm in southern Victoria, so it is just Eddie Jones. And Eddie Jones, have you made your way back to Japan yet, or are you still in Australia scouting ahead of the 2027 Rugby World Cup?
It's the longest tour ever, mate. In Towns, last stop in Townsville. Yeah, we play up here in August against Australia, so just having a look at the facility, spent a bit of time with the North Queensland Cowboys yesterday, which was a good bit of professional development. So it's been long but enjoyable, mate.
What did you learn visiting the North Queensland Cowboys?
Look, I think, when you go and visit any team, you're just looking to find some new ideas, just ways of how you approach the players, ways of how you coach the players. The problems are generally always the same for one team to the other. And just hearing how coaches do it, spent a bit of time with Todd Payton and their assistant coaches, Blake Green and Paul Wellens, and they've come off a difficult season last year and been doing really well this season. What have they changed? What have they done to improve the team?
And so what have you taken away specifically for your Japanese team that you think might help give you a slight advantage?
Just a couple of little tactical things, just in terms of the carry and the pass, had a look at. But in the way they train, they've got a couple of good ideas without giving too much away that we'll put into our program. And I think you're always looking for just something that's a little bit fresher, that can make your program a little bit better. And got a couple of good ideas there. So wouldn't be good of me to give away those ideas.
No. But okay, but so then in terms of your preparation and looking at the facilities and other parts of Townsville as you prepare for that important match against the Wallabies later this year, what sorts of things do you look for as you're starting to scope out a city?
Well, we're only here for 2 days, so it's an in and out. We're in Brisbane. We fly to Brisbane first and train in Brisbane, so we've scoped all that out. So here it's more about finding how we set up the hotel, put together the various rooms we need to have so that we get a functional flow within the hotel, and then finding facilities for the non-members to train. And we found, they've set up a great sports centre in Townsville through the Queensland government. They've got a good training ground, fantastic gymnasium that we'll be able to use.
Okay, so back to the rugby, to the wider game. Lots of activity over the weekend, and certainly in the Southern Hemisphere. The big round at the new stadium in Christchurch. 3 double headers, 3 sellouts. It sounded like a remarkable occasion, a remarkable event. Were you able to watch any of the rugby or experience any of the round?
Not really, mate. I've been absolutely flat out on tour. Recce tours, are quite draining because you're looking at 3 or 4 hotels a day, training grounds. So it's been hard to watch any other rugby apart from I've been watching a bit of League One to watch how our players are faring in League One. But I saw a little bit of the Canterbury New South Wales game and certainly it seemed like a fantastic atmosphere, and to kick off the new stadium at Canterbury with the 3 double headers was a good way to start a new life for rugby in Canterbury.
It's certainly, watching it on the TV, it really did. Well, the actual stadium itself looks an absolute, crackerjack facility. 25,000. I think they can put another 5,000 in there. It looks a lot like the stadium that they've got in Otago, but certainly a great venue now for rugby in Christchurch?
Yeah, no, really positive, mate. And I think, one thing that stood out on this tour, on this recce tour, is the quality of stadiums in Australia. And obviously they've been able to mirror that in Christchurch, but just going to the stadiums in Australia, we've been to Suncorp, the one in Townsville. They're really good quality stadiums and great sizes, I think, for rugby.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. I think this Christchurch stadium will become one of the great stadiums for rugby. I'm sure there'll be many great games played there over the years, and really an encouraging start, and encouraging certainly for Super Rugby in what has been an up and down start to the season so far, to be able to get that lift from such an encouraging performance, something in the order of 14,000 fans travelling to Christchurch. I think a third of those came from Australia. But looking at the results, and I watched a couple of the Australian games, again, continued disappointing results for the Australian teams in Super Rugby at the moment.
I think there's a couple of things about that. I think, firstly, in terms of rugby unity, which we speak about a fair bit, I think rugby does events really well. And I think having that, I don't know what they call it, Super Rugby get-together or gather round, is an event that people want to go to. I know in Australia it's struggled a little bit, but certainly in New Zealand it seems to have captured the audience. Secondly, in terms of the Australian teams, they'll be disappointed with that results, and it still shows that imbalance between New Zealand and Australia. And we've spoken about that before. There's some longer term issues that need to be looked at rather than just the short term results.
Well, certainly there was some very good news for Australian rugby last week in terms of the financial results that were announced. A record operating surplus of $70.6 million for the financial year 2025. Rugby Australia now has cash reserves of $31.4 million. They have paid off the very expensive loan that was in place, and certainly a fantastic financial result for Australia, and largely down to the impact of the British and Irish Lions Tour, where the match day revenue for the British and Irish Lions Tour was $146.8 million. It's the power of the Lions, isn't it, really, from a financial point of view? It could not have arrived at a better time.
Well, again, it just reinforces the importance of events in rugby. I think, more and more we look at rugby. Rugby's a event sport. It's not a domestic competition sport that does well, but it does well in events. And, and all of this in Australian rugby, a lot of credit's got to go to Hamish McClellan, the former chairman, who we had a little bit to do with. That, he set up that Lions tour, was instrumental in the organisation of it, and also the World Cup going forward, which is going to place Australia financially in a good position for a period of time.
Yes, that's very true. Hamish, as chairman, certainly, when he really got straight down to work, when he took on the job, established the bid for the Rugby World Cup. And I think that's another, obviously, significant revenue event that is coming for Australia, another $100 million that will be paid to Rugby Australia from World Rugby. So on top of that, plus the Lions Tour, but Andy Marinos as well, the architects of this joint venture with the Lions. So I'm sure, they should be well pleased, both Andy Marinos and Hamish McLennan, for having put that in place. Both of them have copped a bit of heat over the time, but certainly I'm, looking at those fantastic financial results, I'm sure they will be well pleased with those, the decisions that were taken during their time in charge. And in fact, to have turned around a $36.8 million loss from last year is an outstanding performance. And I think everybody in Australian rugby is delighted that is in fact the case. But now, where does the money get invested? Where does it get spent? Obviously, Phil Waugh has spoken about the investment fund, and the first of those that happened in Australia was post the 2000 Olympics, when the Australian Olympic Committee took, I think it was about a $90 million fee from the New South Wales, or could have been the Australian government, and they were able to invest that over time. And now it sits as a corpus that then generates about a third of the revenue that then funds the high performance ends of the Australian Olympic Committee and the team's activities. What's your thoughts about what you would do to spend the money? Because I think one of the other areas that's probably not getting much money invested in it at the moment is the women's program ahead of the 2029 World Cup. Beaten again at the weekend, the Anzac Day test on the Gold Coast against the Black Ferns, 40 points to 5. They've now lost 30 times in a row against the Black Ferns. So if you had access to that types of money, Eddie Jones, where would you spend it?
Well, I think it's a pretty simple answer, mate. It needs to be spent on the development of the game. The way for rugby to be successful in Australia is for the Wallabies to be a top 3 country in the world. And I'm sure it's the same for the women as well, be a top 3 country in the world. So how do you be a top 3 country in the world? You recruit the best talent, you develop that talent, and because there's plenty of talent in Australia, we see that. We know that. Got NRL, there's going to be 19 clubs in 2028 in NRL, and they can all spend exactly the same amount of money Australian Rugby Union can on development, right? So that's the challenge we've got. So how do you get keep the best talent? The number of kids that have played in GPS schools in Brisbane and Sydney over the last period of time that have got exceptional talent and then end up in NRL clubs, you run out of fingers, right? Everyone's got examples. Everyone can tell you stories about it. So if you're able to keep half of those kids, imagine how much stronger Australian rugby would be. So that has to be the number one priority of Australian rugby. And that costs money. You don't get a return on that money for a period of time. And that's why administrators, struggle to invest in that money, because they want results to keep them in jobs. And the only one who really had the foresight of ever doing that over the last period of time has been John O'Neill. And it'll be a challenge for Waugh and his cohorts to have the courage to do that.
So in terms then is that payments to these players that is the main lever that you have to keep them in the game, given that there is so much money that is on offer for junior players in NRL clubs?
Yeah, I don't think it's not so much money, it's creating a pathway for them. Like if you're a young kid now and you're in the Newcastle Knights program, you play, and I don't know the correct order of this, Matthew Shield, SG Ball, Flegg, and you've got a progression from 16s, 18s to 20 to play for Newcastle. So you can do that for any other team, right? And they get assisted in their gym. They might get, at some stage, they'll get some money for doing that. But there's a progression now, and now NRL is glamorous. So if you're a rugby player, you go to a generally private school, then you go to the academy in Super Rugby, and then there's a gap for you of how you progress your career. And that's the challenge. How can they make sure there's a pathway for these players to keep developing?
Well, that will be the challenge, and it will be interesting to see where that investment goes. Just before we leave, the Super Round from last weekend, we saw Lester Fainga'anuku from the Crusaders, who's a midfielder. He played at number 7 at the weekend. I don't know if did you see that game? And you did say that you were watching a little bit of it. Did you observe Leicester's performance as a midfielder playing in the forwards? I think he had something like 19 carries. and I'm interested in your views about this development of these swing players. Obviously, back in the day, Jack Nowell was one of your earliest sort of experiments around that. First of all, your assessment of Leicester's performance, and secondly, where are we in terms of developing those hybrid players in the game?
Well, they basically use him as a ball carrier, and he's a powerful ball carrier. He's got good footwork, and it's a natural progression of the game to develop these hybrid players. Particularly centres and back rowers, are quite similar, particularly if they're playing in what's called an edge role on the outside the centre of the field. And I think it's just a natural progression of the game, mate. The only places we don't get that change in position is in the front row and the lock switcher. Is a uniqueness of rugby in that we have a scrum that requires specialists 1, 2, and 3, and obviously locks in terms of lineouts. But even France have changed that a little bit. If you look at how they play, they're basically their back rowers are their jumpers and their locks are their carriers. And the game of rugby's changed considerably. That now, in terms of the ball carrier, it's become such an important part of the game, be able to generate quick ruck speed. You're always looking to see how you can improve your carrying your team, and the centres generally have better footwork, and if they're a big guy, there's no reason why they can't play in the back row.
How does it change, though? But how would it then change the way that you're preparing your team and preparing your players? Does it change structurally the way that you go about organising your training and your practices so as that they train perhaps in both positions?
Not greatly, mate. We've got a guy in Japan called Teenan Costley. He's as quick as any winger in Japan, but he plays in the back row. So sometimes we start our campaigns with forwards and backs camps, and he'll spend a few days at the backs camp, which he enjoys because he doesn't get beaten up like the forwards do.
Fair enough. Well, interesting to keep an eye on that as players continue to develop. You are on this magical mystery tour at the moment, and the news that came out last week was that because of travel, because of what other reasons, during the Nations Championship, that Japan will be taking on Ireland in Newcastle. Your views?
You know why we're playing Ireland in Newcastle, mate? Do you think that's
you tell me.
Mate? Well,
you tell me.
Ireland have all the power at World Rugby, so we have to play our home game. That should be in Tokyo in Australia to make sure Ireland doesn't have to travel too much. Let's be frank about this.
No, well, you tell me the story. So what happened?
I just told you.
So Ireland said, we're not going to Tokyo. We're going to play. We're not going.
We're not going. So we have to play in Newcastle, so we just have to suck it up. And that's what happens when you're not a major political power at the table.
Wow, that's interesting. So
it's not interesting, it's reality.
Yeah, but I'm interested. I would be interested to know exactly how those conversations took place. As in,
I know how and it took place. I would say we're not going from New Zealand to Japan, then back to Australia, right? So we're not doing that. Okay, so Japan, you want to be in the Nations Cup? Yes, of course we do. So you've got to use one of your home games to play in Australia. It's simple, mate. It's not complicated.
Yeah. No, I understand that it's not complicated, but perhaps it's not fair that one of your home matches is being played not at home.
But we've got to be grateful to be in the Nations Cup, mate. And at the end of the day, that's a huge honour for Japan to be in the Nations Cup. So we've got to accept there might be some inequalities in terms of the distribution of games.
Okay, but it's the reality now. But looking forward to playing in Newcastle. I hope you certainly. It's an emerging, strengthening hub for rugby in Australia, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know about that. I think Newcastle's been probably neglected for a long period of time, mate. You know, it definitely was. We went up. We spent some time there last week. Yeah, and the Wildfires Club's doing pretty well, and by all accounts, the juniors in the Hunter Valley's doing very well. So it needs some encouragement. So we're looking forward to playing the game there against a very good Island side.
Yeah, look, I think it'll be
keep everyone happy.
Indeed. Well, certainly there was an enormous. Go on.
This is my first step to be a rugby politician, mate. Next time I'm going to wear a blazer. I'm going to have the leather patches on.
Save me, mate. I think.
I reckon I don't
think so.
Consider at one stage to be like that, mate.
Let me give you some advice. I don't think it'd suit you. But listen, we are taking Rugby Unity on the road. And so on Friday, the 10th of July, which is the day before the game in Newcastle, before Japan take on Ireland at the McDonald Jones Stadium, Hunter Rugby and Rugby Unity are bringing a live episode recording to NEX in Newcastle for an afternoon of stories, insight and conversation. It'll be myself, Ewan McKenzie, and we were hoping that you were going to be there, but you're busy. And we have asked Andy Farrell, and he is seeing what he might be able to do to attend that afternoon. The event starts at 12 for a 12:30 start. And it's all about raising money, really, for grassroots across the Hunter, from Colts, women's, sevens to their representative teams. And you can buy your tickets. There's a link in the show notes. So make sure you jump out there. And I still might try to convince you for a special guest star performance, maybe 15 minutes or so on your way home from training. Eddie Jones, drop in and join in the fun. But yeah, our first ever live Rugby Unity. So if you're interested in coming along, jump onto the link and sign it up there. I think it looks to be a great occasion. And certainly when the Wallabies played Fiji there, they played in the afternoon. Is it an afternoon game or an evening game? I didn't check.
I think it's 3 o'clock, mate. I'm pretty sure.
3 o'clock, yeah. Anyway, but it was again, I didn't get to the game itself, but did watch it on the television. Beautiful day in Newcastle. Crowd was packed. Loads of kids on the field after it. It was a really big success, that last test match there played in Newcastle, and I'm sure everybody in the Hunter will get in behind that. Other rugby at the weekend, and for me, when we go back to... go on, mate.
McDonald, the interesting... relationship is McDonald Jones, which is the naming rights of the stadium, is actually part of a Japanese building company.
Ah.
And so the Japanese building company is bringing out 100 people. So at least we'll have 100 fans there, mate. We'll have 100 fans there.
Very good. Okay, well, that's good. Well, I'm sure you'll have a lot more than that. Well, actually, the number of Irish that are in Australia at the moment, lots of people, lots of the young Irish people out here enjoying life in Australia. I am sure that Newcastle will be absolutely packed.
There won't be any Coogee, mate. Coogee will be empty there.
That's right.
You have to walk down the streets of Coogee and have rights away everywhere. There'll be no one there, mate.
No, it will be a great occasion, and I know a lot of enthusiasm in rugby in the Newcastle and Hunter at the moment. Just over the weekend, and I think this is the emerging story that as we look at how do we help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, the Women's Six Nations played over the weekend. 3 games. England defeated Wales 62 points to 24 in Bristol. Italy, too good for Scotland, 41 points to 14 in Parma. And France, 26, defeated Ireland 7 in Clermont in France. The crowds were exceptional at all of the venues. Parma is obviously the smallest of the 3, but it was full. Clermont was full and Bristol was full. And I think off the back of the Women's 2025 Rugby World Cup, in terms of how do we help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, we are seeing extraordinary growth in the women's game. And for mine, we're seeing extraordinary improvement in the quality of the matches. I watched all 3 matches over the weekend. And Eddie Jones, I have to say that it is entertaining. Women's rugby is compelling to watch at the moment. It's a great product, and it's attracting a new type of audience to the game.
Well, I think there's no doubt, mate, in terms of rugby worldwide, it's the growth area of the game. And it's pleasing to see that now it's attracting greater crowds. But one of the things that is obviously at the moment is the inequality in the teams, the professionalism of the teams, and that can only be helped. The quality of the professionalism can only be helped if the crowds improve and more money comes into the game. And then because England's had a head start. They've started the Melbourne Cup from the top of the straight, right? Everyone else is out of the barriers 3,200 metres behind them in terms of professionalism. And they're obviously a powerful team. But the results, when you win 6 Nations games by 60 points, it's not a good indication of the quality of the teams. And, you mentioned Australia before. The Australian women, from what I believe, are very much part-time. They have a small domestic competition. So, for Australia to improve in that area, they have to be able to have the ability to be professional and have better coaching and a better structure around them. And obviously the funds that Australia made, we should see an increase in that, which from all reports hasn't been the case.
Yeah. Not so far, but I'm sure that it will come. But one of the things I have observed, even from the 2025 Women's Rugby World Cup to now, for example, the Italian team and the French team, to my viewing of them at least, they've improved again from the way they played at the World Cup in 2025. So I think you're seeing the improvement that's coming. At the moment, you're right, England are well clear of everybody at the moment, but I don't think we want England to sort of stop. We need England to keep going and keep trying to push the standards because, as I say, just watching the games, watching the way that the women play the game, it's a different style to the way that the men play, but it's no less entertaining. And some of the skills on offer, some of the tries that were scored over the weekend, some of the defence, I think there's a real improvement in the game, and I think it is going to continue to grow and grow substantially, particularly as we work to, the Rugby World Cup in Australia in 2029. And I think that's the big thing for Australian rugby is that if we want a competitive Australian team at that home World Cup in 2029, now is the time to invest. You can't wait till next year or the year after. That investment needs to take place now if we're going to make the Wallaroos more competitive. And the final match from the weekend from the Women's Pacific 4, Canada 50 defeated the USA 12 and the Black Ferns champions for another year in the Women's Pacific 4. So well done and congratulations to everybody involved in the women's game at the moment. It is moving ahead nicely. Another competition. Yeah, go on, mate.
Could I just add something on the Canada team? Because that's done a completely different way. Canada is, from what I understand, again, in the university system, women's rugby is a tier one sport. So therefore it attracts the best athletes in Canada to rugby because they get an opportunity to study at good universities and there's a scholarship system. So they've been able to create from a university system this side that is ranked in the top 3 in the world consistently. They haven't had the professional resources England have to create this team. So it just shows you again, in terms of developing your nation's team, there are different ways of doing it. And I think if you look at the other side of Canada, the men's, where rugby's not a tier 1 sport in the university, they've gone from being you go back to 1995, they were a top 8 team in the world, and their drive, question Pemby, right? So you're a rugby man. Who's the lowest ranked team in the World Cup?
Who is
the lowest ranked team in the World Cup?
going into the World Cup?
No, who is the lowest ranked team in the World Cup? Yeah.
Samoa.
No, Canada.
Canada.
Ranked 24th in the world. So it shows you the decline of Canada as a rugby nation. You know, they were a top 8 country in the world, but they've suffered from the fact that they don't get any advantage at university.
Yeah.
Well, Sam.
Well, yeah, it is. And I think this is last week's show was a little bit depressing when we started talking about Victoria in Australia, which obviously is a challenge. Canada is another challenge. And, we see Moana Pacifica, another challenge. And look, I think this is the thing about the game around the world that's sort of lumpy. In parts it's going particularly well. In other parts it's not going as well as it needs to. And I'm not sure World Rugby can be responsible for all of it. But how indeed we sort of level that out and support the different unions in different ways, I'm not quite sure exactly how it gets done. But certainly, yeah, progress is uneven. And I did notice actually, and Brett Robinson in Hong Kong, he was asked about the Pacific, and he very confidently said, well, with all due respect to the National Rugby League and Peter V'landys, rugby is the game of the Pacific. I'd be a little bit more circumspect about that at the moment, the way that the NRL is doubling down, the way they are investing, the way that we're seeing the New Zealand Warriors perform in the NRL. We see the Warriors play the Dolphins in Wellington over the weekend. It's packed. We see the Pacific Series at the end of the rugby league season after the grand final. I see rugby league as a continued and major threat to rugby union in the Pacific, and I think we need to be mindful of it. And I know World Rugby continues to invest in pathways and that there's money there, but we need to be on high alert for what is a very serious threat to the game in the Pacific from the National Rugby League.
Maybe Robbo needs to trade his shirt and tie and pants for a pair of chino shorts and a polo shirt and go to Tonga, Fiji and have a look.
Well, I'm sure he does. And I'm sure he does. And I'm sure he's talking to them regularly. And I know he's got to talk up his book about that. But, I just, the National Rugby League are very focused and they have a lot of resources. And it is a clear strategic intent for them to continue to chip away at it. And when you consider the importance of a city like Brisbane with its huge Pacifica population there, and you have a look at the Dolphins and you have a look at the Broncos and everything else, I think we need to be very mindful that it is a serious threat to the game.
We're not talking rugby, we're building it. Rugby Unity.
Okay, time for the third voice. And a big thanks to all of you for continuing to put forward your questions. And obviously a lot of them are a bit long, but I'm going to read through them because that's as you've sent them. So Richard Ross Adams, enjoy the pod. In my opinion, the decline began around 2013 when Rugby Australia moved away from the elite National Rugby Academy, which was the pathway where talented up-and-coming players were exposed to expert coaching and turned them into the world-class players of old with a singular focus, circa 90s through till 2013. The model was then decentralised and shifted to state-based, and since then the decline has been evident in my opinions. The success or lack thereof that the Wallabies have had in the last decade has a direct influence in the levels of interest for young and aspiring players as well as audiences. If Wallabies start winning, things will change. RA should bring back the centralised academy system and properly invest in it. Would love to hear the thoughts from the panel. Eddie Jones, what's your thoughts on this idea of a national centralised academy?
We helped set that up in 2004. That was the direct results of the profits made from the World Cup in 2003. Yeah, and it definitely we felt it had a positive effect, and it was only scrapped because of the lack of funding. And now they've got the funding, so it's a no-brainer. It should come back. Australia needs to be, for rugby to be at its strongest, it needs to be nationalised. Everyone needs to work together. It's just not strong enough for people to go off on their own accord and do it. So it's a no-brainer. It's a good statement, not so much a question. It's a very good statement. Obviously, whoever wrote it knows what they're talking about.
So just in terms of how that worked then, that central, when you set it up, when you were thinking about it, when you were planning about it, what were the sort of foundations and the first principles that you were looking at in terms of developing it, and how did it actually come to pass? What did it look like?
Well, I'll tell you what we did. We recruited the best strength and conditioning coaches in Australia. Peter Birch has been at Hawthorn, Dean Benton has been at the Storm, John Pryor, a number of other guys, and they were set up in Brisbane, Sydney, Canberra. So there was three talent squads set up, and then we recruited good rugby coaches, one of which was Scott Wisemantle, who's, if you talk to anyone in rugby, he's probably one of the best coaches Australia's produced over the last 20 years, and he's now doing a great job at Parramatta, though it wasn't too good on the weekend against Manly, but he's doing a great job there. So there was good coaches in place, and then those guys would go there a couple of times a week, get strength and conditioning advice, be put on programs, get skill work. They'd have yearly plans on how they improve as the best players to become the best players at the age of 15 and 16. And it's a simple, but it costs money.
Yeah.
It was only scrapped because they couldn't afford it. So now's the time to put it back into place in a better way, and I'm sure there's people smarter than me that can do that now.
Yeah, but that doesn't sound like a lot of money. Like, you're not building buildings, are you? It is a lot of money?
Because you got to employ coaches, and coaches cost money. And when Australian rugby, we know, has been scraping to get through, right? And so you run that program, say it costs $1.5 million a year, $2 million a year, right? And you're losing $35 million a year. What comes out first? That comes out first, right? That's the reality of it.
All right, to the next question from Chris Hodgson from YouTube. If Sanzar isn't trying to get World Rugby to sponsor to start an American team based in Hawaii prior to the upcoming World Cups in Australia and then the USA, and one or more teams from Japan, then they are not a serious organisation. What are your thoughts? Okay, so what we've got there is an American team in Hawaii and another team from Japan to be competing, I imagine, in Super Rugby. I presume that is what Chris Hodgson is talking about. Your thoughts about that, Eddie Jones?
Chris, I think in principle you're probably right, although the American team will come from California, not from Hawaii. California's, I think it's the fourth biggest economy in the world, or fourth or fifth biggest economy in the world. It has a rugby tradition, and it is the most obvious place for a Super Rugby team to come out of. Super Rugby team in Japan, but someone's going to have to fund it. I don't know who's going to fund it. You're going to have to find a benefactor that's got $10 million a year that he's prepared to lose. And if you find someone like that, then you'll get a Super Rugby team in Japan. And is people going to watch then that Super Rugby competition between New Zealand, Australia, an American team and a Japanese team? Is it going to create enough television money to fund the tournament? Because that's what you're looking at. You need a tournament that's going to attract television money to fund the tournament. And at the moment, the tournament doesn't. We know it's on Stan, and Stan might be doing a great job broadcasting it, but it doesn't attract a great deal of finance. South Africa dropped out, which had, I believe, had 60% of the funding because of the huge television through Super Sports and the bulk of the South African or the African countries. And now that's all dropped out. So it's a matter of finding a competition that's financially successful that helps those countries develop their national teams. And certainly for America to have a Super Rugby team, it'd be great for the USA. And for Japan to have a Super Rugby team would be great for Japan. But how do you fund it?
Okay.
Does Elon Musk like rugby?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the cheap money into sport, I think it's starting to disappear. You know, I think the Live Golf looks like it's on life support, and you see the financial performance. A lot of the Premier League clubs at the moment, trying to make the maths add up in some of these sports is pretty tough. So I don't think there's any cheap money around at the moment, and so I don't think that idea is going to get up. Okay, next question. It's a good idea. Yeah, exactly. So, but from Fergus Hodgson.
Disappointed, mate.
Fergus Hodgson says, I've been an avid rugby fan my entire life, from my youngest days in New Zealand. But in recent years, the game has become stale. I cannot bear to watch these one-out runs, one after the other, close to the line. So much of the game lacks creativity and thought. In my view, the rules have become too complicated and numerous. Why, for example, do we need the 40-20 kick? Like many Kiwis, I am moving more just to watching the NRL. League has its own problems, but at least it's more dynamic and exciting. I hate to say this, but the NRL also has a higher level in terms of athleticism. The idea of returning rugby to domestic competitions makes sense to me. In New Zealand, we already have the National Provincial Championship, which makes Super Rugby unnecessary. The NPC has more loyalty and tradition, whereas Super Rugby seems to be more like mercenaries. Eddie Jones, what are your reactions to the comment there by Fergus Hodgson?
Well, I think Fergus got a lot of good things to say. I personally think for New Zealand and Australia at the moment, that Super Rugby, the concept of Super Rugby's probably had its life, and then maybe consideration should be to go back for New Zealand to a provincial competition, Australia to a club competition, and then find some sort of short super competition from that. Yeah, where maybe the top 2 clubs in Australia compete against the top 4 clubs in New Zealand over a 6-week period. You got the best players playing against each other. All the All Blacks will be playing, all the Wallabies will be playing, and that may attract some television money. And I also think for the development of the game in both the countries, at the moment, Super Rugby is not fulfilling that spot for them. In terms of the game being overcomplicated, well, it's always been a complicated game, mate. Ewan always makes the point about the scrum. Forwards used to sort the scrum out themselves, but we had a safety issue because one side would get back and want to smash in, the other side wouldn't want to. And, it was dangerous. And so we've had to bring the referee into that. 40-20s, it hasn't had a real effect on the game at all. You see one every 2 games, maybe. So I don't know what you're watching, Fergus. Maybe you're drinking too much scotch, mate, but it hasn't had a massive influence on the game. But I agree with you that the tedious one-off runners in front of the try line. But watch rugby league when they come out of their own line. Do they have one-off runners, Fergus? So come on, mate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I imagine after you've had such a great and successful weekend that we've just had in Christchurch, 3 double headers, 75,000 people travelling. If you are part of that Super Rugby, you could see that flickering there, but whether or not you can then translate that into a compelling tournament, a compelling multi-week tournament, we'll wait and see. That is the challenge of the people involved, but certainly that is an alternative that you have just outlined there. And a final question for this week, and as I say, thanks again to everyone out there in the big wide world of rugby unity. And I just have to say, we're coming up to our 12-month anniversary. The 30th of April is our 12-month anniversary. And across our platform, we have had over 20 million views, which is quite an extraordinary number, really, over that period of time, views and listens. So a big thanks to you that there is an audience clearly out there of people who are interested in how do we help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. So thanks for tuning in. So please, if you do see our content on social media, like, share, comment. We had some great content over the weekend. I did an interview with the chairman or president of Rugby Africa, Herbert Mensah, and we had that story posted last week, and it certainly got a good reaction from people around the world about the potential of growing rugby in Africa, not just in South Africa, but more broadly across the African continent. So I commend that interview to you as well. So the final question to Ewan and Eddie, but Ewan's not here. So it's from Marvin1243. I think the rugby union problem in Australia starts at school. South Africa has 7 times the number of schools as Australia and New Zealand. As Australia. New Zealand has half the schools of Australia which play rugby union. That maths does not add up when compared to the relative populations of the countries. The other perception in Australia is that rugby union in Australia is a private school sport. It feels like a stigma, i.e. it's for rich, snobby people. What do you reckon? Does it start at school level or professional club level? Eddie Jones.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with rugby in Australia. There's plenty of good players coming through. The schools are doing a good job and the clubs are doing a good job. But where we're missing out is in terms of recruiting, keeping the best talent in. There's plenty of talent there, but we're missing out on the best talent. We've already covered that today. So I don't want to criticise the school system. I got enough trouble in England criticising the school system. I've got enough enemies in the public schools.
No, yeah, and look, could the game do a better job? I think it could. You know, you think about the old days of, you know, particularly in the state of New South Wales, the Waratah Shield, the combined high schools, you know, wonderful competition, the Waratah Shield that would have been, you know, certainly brought attention and focus to the game, encourage people into the game. And look, it's an inclusive sport. It belongs to everybody. So, you know, I think we do need to welcome everybody into the game, but that doesn't mean tearing down the private schools. They should continue to do everything that they're doing at the moment to be as competitive and attractive as possible. Eddie.
So if you look to Ireland, right? Again, each country does what they need to do to be as strong as they can. So Ireland's gone from being a country outside the top 8, outside the top 6, to be consistently top 3. So the Leinster Academy is comprised of, and I can be corrected here, but of basically 16 private schools that operate in Dublin, around Dublin, right? Of that, 75% of Leinster Academy then comprises the Leinster team. The Leinster team then comprises 75% of the Ireland national team. Yeah, I was there and I've told the story. I met Andy Farrell in the street and he was saying his young fella was picked up at 7 o'clock in the morning to go and do skills session at the public school in Dublin. So for me, one of the things that I'd look at, and this is almost against my philosophy, but I think in Australia, one of the things that should be looked at, could you create centres of excellence in some of the public schools, some of the private schools in Australia, and really concentrate the talent? And then, so say you go to St. Joseph's and make that centre of excellence, you pour some money in the gym, you put a skills coach in there. It might be another way of doing it. You go to Nudgee College or whatever it is, and you do that up there and they become centres. So you're producing these players that have the best strength and conditioning, the best skill development from a young age. And then at the same time, then the Waratah Shield, is that a rugby issue or an education issue? And I'm not sure. Yeah, because sometimes that might have been made by the education system not to continue with the Waratah Shield. If it was an education, you can't do anything about it. If it was a rugby decision, then you've got to create opportunities for kids outside those private schools, to then have the opportunity to shine, which was usually through the Waratah Shield. You know, myself, Matraville High, we won that a few times, and that was the opportunity for us to then to be to play club rugby in Randwick or anywhere else.
Yes, okay, that's not a bad idea. I think again, but this is I suppose this is the purpose of rugby unity. Really, is to try to throw out some ideas that people might want to grab onto to see if we can continue this improvement of the sport around the world, and where are those models that suit your particular circumstance, and what are the problems that you need to solve in your particular country, and think about how you might be able to apply some of these different ideas.
What I find on that, and having been in Australia last month, a lot of people don't talk about it. There's a certain amount of shit. It's just how it is. It's bad at the moment, rather than trying to come up with solutions. Well, I think there's a couple of solutions that are there. You get the National Development Squad going again. You create centres of excellence in private schools where you bring those kids through, and then you've got to find some avenue to bring the kids through government schools. How can you do that? And that might be through the National Development System. Yeah. But there's possibilities out there, but it takes people sitting around, nodding it out, really have a good discussion what's going to be best for Australian rugby. And you need someone like a Newcastle to do that, to lead that discussion. Like he's done it in Ireland. You need someone who's above the Australian, not above the Australian game, but is almost disinvested with a state interest here that can sit above it. That just wants to build for the sake of rugby. Yeah. Might be someone like Link. Can you get Link out of the farm and do it?
It might be a bit hard to get him off the farm. I think he enjoys it too much down there at the moment. Okay, just a couple of things before we go. And again, rolling around the world as we do, looking at different things that are happening. At the RFU, the governance reforms have failed, despite some optimism going in that the representative group who had spoken. Well, it doesn't surprise me, but it does disappoint me because I just can't see that we're going to make progress unless we can modernise the governance of the sport. It's the same with the world, the rugby, the council. At World Rugby. I think there needs reform there. They need to give the board more power. We need to be able to make decisions faster. And I did have hope that they had done the work, that they had actually, gone and prosecuted the case as best as they could, and they certainly had the agreement of the representatives of the club. But when it came to the extraordinary general meeting or whatever it was called, the changes have foundered. And so we now sit at a pause, and perhaps our most influential union in the world is now at a point of stasis. It's stopped in terms of its governance reforms. And so what is going to happen next? So disappointing for me on that one. I would love to have seen that go through as a sign that we are starting to understand that we do have serious problems in the game, and we do need to address them, and we do need to modernise governance. And I do hope people listening from the council at World Rugby, understanding that they have a responsibility in the best interests of the global game to establish the best governance that we need to take the game forward. From the Big Three this week, and this again, just go to the Rugby Unity Substack and subscribe to the Big Three. It's a fantastic AI-generated news digest that comes out every Monday, and it gives you the world of what's happened in rugby, and it's fantastic. It crawls, the AI, the artificial intelligence crawls across the media, it crawls across social media, and it surfaces all of the most topical and most popular commentary from around the web. And one of the things that I saw most interestingly this weekend was that Spain will be heading to Wales to take on the Welsh a couple of weeks ahead of Rugby World Cup in Australia. So great to see that. And again, the Spanish have confirmed that they have an interest in hosting the 2035 or the 2037 or maybe even the 2043 Rugby World Cup, and they have assembled support from the Spanish government, the Spanish Football Federation and La Liga. I would love to see that continue to grow. Over the weekend, the Under-20s Rugby Championship at Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium in the Eastern Cape. New Zealand 34, too good for Australia 29, and South Africa 48, too good for Argentina 21. Those matches obviously being played as the Rugby Championship, but also as they prepare for the Under-20s World Championship that gets underway in Georgia in June. Eddie Jones, as an elite coach looking at the under-20s, and you've obviously just had your, I think, under-23 Japanese team, just how important is that level of World Rugby in terms of continuing to build the consistency and the competitiveness of teams at the elite level?
Well, it gives those young players their first real opportunity to be international players. So that's massively important. For those young Australian players, particularly we played against them in Coffs Harbour. They're playing against the best players in their position around the world, so they get to benchmark themselves. They get to understand where they are in terms of the ranking. And the interesting thing to come out of it was South Africa last year, which have been dominant now at that level. And it used to be New Zealand and England were dominant at that level. And now South Africa. They used in this, they have this rugby championship and then they have the world championships. Apparently they used 90 players, which shows the depth that they have now.
Wow.
So rugby's just going through the roof in South Africa. And it's always been a big sport, but because the Springboks are winning, because they're doing well, and it's become a very inclusive sport in South Africa, they've got such incredible depth there. And they're going to be a difficult side to knock off that number one spot in the world for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I do. I remember watching that under-20s last year and some of the talent in the South African team. Hashim Peed, the 9, stunning footballer who is obviously, we'll see him in a few years' time, lead that next generation of South African teams. So,
incredible.
Yeah. Great to see. And just wrapping up the international scene in the Rugby Europe Men's Conference, Moldova defeated Bulgaria 26 to 23, and Slovenia 45 defeated Slovakia 17. And the upcoming fixtures in the Rugby Europe Men's Conference, Montenegro takes on Kosovo on the 2nd of May, and Estonia takes on Norway on the same day. So there you go. Around the world and back again, Eddie Jones. So you're on your way home. When are you back
tonight,
in Japan? Tonight.
This time tomorrow I'll be in Tokyo.
In Tokyo. Okay. And where are you? What's happening now? Back to the Japan One League. Interestingly, actually, before you go, I saw Will Genia's calling for the Australian rugby to keep a close eye on Samu Kerevi, who's obviously playing well for the D-Rocks team in the Japan League. What do you think of that idea for Australian fans, that Kerevi comes back and is a part of the 2027 Rugby World Cup?
Well, I actually watched him play yesterday afternoon, and he was absolutely outstanding. And you think about Kerevi, when Kerevi played, I think it was for Australia post the Olympics, where was it, 2021? He had that stellar season. He would have been the best centre in the world. Now, we haven't seen that for a while from him, but certainly, in this League One game, you've got to take the context of the game. He looked like he was getting back to that sort of standard of play, and certainly Australia could benefit from having a guy like him in their squad. But the rules that are antiquated, they're leather patch rules. They got to get rid of those leather patch rules, and then you'll be eligible. And the other thing about Will Genia, he's starting to take his coaching very seriously. He's starting to carve out a career himself, and he was a wonderful player for Australia. and a wonderful ambassador for the game. So it's good to see him back in the coaching.
Yeah, no doubt. I had the great pleasure of having a conversation with him when Rugby Unity went on the road earlier late last year up to Tokyo for that great week that we had leading into that. It was a fantastic test match at the National Stadium there between Australia and Japan. But in terms of what you're actually doing, watching the players, obviously the Nations Championship is coming and it's coming quickly. What sort of priority do you have in the next couple of weeks?
It's all about selection, mate, now. We're down to the last. They got 2 rounds to go in League One. Who's fit, who's not fit, who's in form, not in form, what new players can we find? We've probably found 2 or 3 young guys in the under-23s that we're going to play in Japan 15 games. So we've got 2 Japan 15 games coming up in May against Hong Kong and then Maori All Blacks, which will then lead us into the Nations Cup. So selection becomes pretty important now. And just a couple of ideas that, I've got from this that will then incorporate into how we prepare the team. Yeah, because we're going to find we're playing this year, every side we play against is ranked ahead of us. So we're going to find a way to play above ourselves. So it's a good little challenge now. And it's been great. Been great having a month in Australia. Yeah, I've been lucky enough to meet a number of, particularly NRL coaches over the period of time. We're picking their brains, trying to get some good ideas of how we can go forward.
Actually, just one final question before I let you go. Charlie Mondelli, who's a long-term listener and an enthusiastic participant of the Third Voice, he did send me a note the other day about the changes in qualification for the Japanese teams that are going to be introduced into the League One. What's your views, given that it looks like it's going to be harder for players, international players, to get opportunities into the Japanese league?
It's chapter 2 of being a politician, mate. Out of my realm.
Of your realm. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. I won't ask you. I won't ask you to. I'm
going to wear a blazer the next area of Rugby Uni.
Very good.
We both wear blazers.
One day. Okay. All right, Eddie Jones, thank you so much for your time today. And thanks to you, audience, for coming back once again and for your enthusiastic support. As I say, we're coming up to 12 months. We are now 20 million plus views across the platforms, 134 countries, people interested in the game. And thank you for your participation, for your questions, for your comments, and just sharing the discussions that we've had. We're sort of entering into a new part of Rugby Unity as we try to understand where do we take it from here? What do we do with it from here? And we'll be having some conversations in the next few weeks with different prospective partners about just exactly what do we do with Rugby Unity as we continue to try to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. But anyway, thanks to you people for coming back. But please remember, be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.